All right, the record will reflect the presence of the members of the jury. You may be seated. Sergeant, you may be seated. Thank you very much. And Ms. Jones, you may continue with your examination of the witness.
Yes. The approach, Sergeant Davis.
Yes.
For the record, I've shown defense counsel would have been marked for identification as states 390 and 391. Sergeant Biggis, will you look at states 390 and 391 for identification? Do you recognize 390 and 391?
Yes, I do.
In regards to states 390 for identification, what is it?
390 is a cover sheet that was sent to me by AT&T, and the key for interpreting the records, along with what I had originally faxed to them, which was sent along with the records for 808-359-4842.
And what is 391?
391 is the fax cover sheet, the key, and my original fax to AT&T that was sent along with the records for 808-280-5332.
Now, in regards to 90, on the cover sheet, you
Yes.
turn to the cover sheet.
Sure.
In regards to the file code, and you can do the same for 391. Does 390 and 391 each contain on that cover sheet a file code?
Yes, they do.
Okay, what is the file code? What does that mean?
That's the number that AT&T uses to track the request for the account records.
Okay, and is that something that's included in the correspondence from AT&T to you?
Yes.
And you to AT&T?
Yes.
And are each of the, will you put on the record the file code for that you received, and did you keep that as part of your investigation?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Will you tell us the file code for 808 for the 808-359-4842 that you received as part of your response from AT&T?
Check, you're saying.
Foundational, Your Honor.
She's just asking me to read stuff. That's not in evidence.
Are you asking to read, or are you asking to provide code?
I'm asking him to provide the code.
By reading it off of what he has in front of him.
Do you, okay, have you seen that code before, the law enforcement, the file code for each of the phone numbers? Have you seen them previously?
Yes, I have.
Where have you seen them in your investigation?
I saw them when they were sent to me on the cover sheet when I first received the records from AT&T.
Did you also see them on the CDs from AT&T?
Yes.
Do you remember each of them as you sit here before us and testify?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you, would seeing the cover sheet that was transmitted to you from AT&T regarding 808-359-4842 refresh your recollection as to the file code assigned in the correspondence to you?
Yes, it would.
May the record reflect in showing Sergeant Biggis what has been marked as states 390 for identification, and I'm referring you to the response cover sheet you testified to. Is your recollection refreshed?
Yes.
What is the file code?
Objection, calls for Ducey.
The objection is overruled. This relates to the identifier that this witness uses as well as the AT&T identifying number. Proceed.
Do you remember it?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
159793.001.
I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as states 391. We'll do the same thing with that one. In regards to, what is 391?
391 is the fax cover sheet, the key, and my original fax that I had sent to them for telephone number 808-280-5332.
In response to the cover sheet from AT&T, was this phone number assigned a certain file code?
Yes.
Okay. Do you remember it as you sit here and testify before us?
No, I don't.
Would seeing that cover sheet refresh your recollection?
Yes, it
Would
would.
we take a moment to review states 391 for identification before you, and let us know when your recollection is refreshed as to that file code?
Okay.
Do you remember?
Yes.
Okay. Is your recollection refreshed?
Yes.
What is the file code?
1509787.001.
And similarly, that file code is used in correspondence between you and AT&T.
Yes.
Excuse me. May I see CDs from that meeting, please? See the one that just this one. Okay. May I approach Sergeant Biggis with states 393 for identification?
Yes.
Sergeant Biggis, I'm showing you what's been marked for identification as states 393. Do you recognize this?
Yes, I do.
All right, I'm referring to your notes in the narrative portion of the property voucher attached to this CD that you testified to.
Yes.
Okay, it indicates a phone number on here in the narrative. Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay. Will you tell us what the phone number that is recorded on the property sheet for this CD is?
The phone number on the sheet is 808-259-4842.
Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
Will you correct that for the record?
Yeah, it should be 359, not 259.
So the records that are in this CD are for what phone number?
808-359-4842.
May I approach Sergeant Biggis?
You may.
I've shown defense counsel what has been marked for identification as states 392. Sergeant Biggis, will you examine states 392
Okay.
and tell us whether you recognize it?
Yes, I recognize it.
Okay. And for the record, it's a single sheet of paper in a manila envelope. How do you recognize it without telling us what it is?
Because this was provided to me.
From whom?
Patricia Gagne.
And who is that?
She's a manager at Mono Foods.
And when you say provided to you, did you then submit that into evidence?
Yes.
Right. Let me refer you to the attached property and evidence voucher that's stapled to the front of states 392. Will you tell us when you received that and what you did with it?
I received it on the 6th of March 2014.
And then what did you do with it?
Put it into evidence.
Okay. Do you see your signature submitting that into evidence?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Did you examine that prior to your testimony,
Yes,
as well as here before us today?
yes,
Is it in the same or substantially the same condition as it was when you submitted it into evidence in March of 2014?
yes, it is.
Has it been changed or altered in any way?
No,
And it is, when you say it was given to you by Patricia Gagne, did you watch her produce it for you?
yes.
All right, will you tell us what you saw her do?
She printed it out from her computer.
And where was that done?
Mana Foods,
Where is Mon Foods?
Paia on Baldwin Avenue.
Your Honor, at this time the state offers into evidence what's been marked for identification as states 392.
May I watch your comment?
Yes.
Relative to this exhibit, is it 392, is that what we're talking about, or 292? Do you know?
No, I don't.
So what number is that?
392.
Okay, relative to that 392, we're talking about a time card from Mana Foods, is that accurate?
Yeah, the timesheet.
Okay, and your testimony that you received that from a Patricia Gagne, is that accurate?
Yes,
Would it be fair to say that you cannot testify as to the accuracy of the information in there?
that's correct.
You're not the custodian of records relative to Mana Foods, pay stubs, and paychecks, are you?
No, I'm not.
And in that regard, you have no way of verifying the accuracy of the contents of what is in, I guess, 392. Is that accurate?
Correct.
No further questions. I'll object to the admission. Lack of foundation.
You have the exhibit.
May I approach, Your Honor?
You may.
My objection would be 901.
Well, for the, I'll reserve ruling on this, subject to further testimony.
Yes.
All right, I'm assuming that there will be further testimony on this, so
Yes.
I'll wait till then to rule on this, requesting that be admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Sergeant Biggis, in regards to the phone records we've been discussing that you received from AT&T, you testified that you emailed them to Special Agent Michael Easter, is that right?
No, yes, I did.
And also to Detective Hamilton.
Yes, I also emailed Detective Hamilton.
And those are the same records that we've been talking about in states 384, 394. Let me just get double check the numbers. The same sets of CDs we've been talking about, the one with the certification from AT&T and the set that you put into evidence, right?
Yes,
Okay. Those are the same records, just so it's clear, that you emailed to Special Agent Easter, is that right?
Yes.
Did all that you testified to occur here in the county of Maui, state of Hawaii?
Yes, it did.
No any further questions, thank you.
Cross-examination, Mr. Oko.
Nothing from the defense, Your Honor. Thank you.
Are there any juror questions?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. You are excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You may call your next witness.
Thank you. Your Honor, today we'll be calling Special Agent Michael Easter.
This will be asking for a 104 here.
All right. We'll have the jury wait in the jury room while the court conducts this hearing.
With the court's permission, Your Honor, Mr. Nardi will be doing the 104 here.
That's fine.
Questions.
John, he's going to do the hearing.
And the witness may approach.
Just remove the statement of this one.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
You may be seated. Thank you. And you may proceed with your examination of the witness.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Special Agent Easter. First of all, can you please introduce yourself to the court?
Absolutely. Good morning. My name is Michael Easter. I'm a special agent with the FBI.
And which division or unit are you currently assigned to?
I'm currently assigned to the FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey Team, which you'll hear me abbreviate as CAST, or C-A-S-T.
And Special Agent, how long have you been employed by the FBI?
Just over 12 years.
And I'm going to use that abbreviation you just mentioned, the unit that you're involved with, the CAST. Could you describe what are your primary duties and responsibilities?
Absolutely. CAST is a unit within the FBI that provides to local, state, and federal law enforcement partners the investigation or analysis of cell site records. And the analysis of those cell site records enable us as investigators to determine calls that were either made or received from a phone, what tower they used, and is that consistent with being in the area of a crime or other type of event. Our unit also provides training throughout the country. I'm one of the FBI's instructors for the program, and we go around throughout the country teaching state, local, and federal law enforcement partners the methodology of analyzing those records to further their investigations.
Now, in addition to those responsibilities and duties, do you actually go into the field and put into practice what you just mentioned?
Yeah, so not only does the unit analyze historical records in the sense of analyzing records that come to me to connect a phone and its user to a crime that, say, took place weeks, months, years in the past, but we also work active cases. So, for example, we regularly get phone calls of a missing person, a kidnapping, or a fugitive that is wanted by law enforcement. And we will analyze those records in real time to help us understand where that phone activity is at, so that we can then direct resources to that area, or even develop a pattern of where that individual is calling from, so that we may be able to predict where they may be that night or the following day.
Now, Special Agent, can you briefly but fully provide us with your educational background?
Yes. So prior to becoming an officer in the United States Marine Corps, I have a bachelor's degree from UC Santa Barbara, As I joined the Marine Corps, I became an officer in the United States Marine Corps, where I was assigned to a signals intelligence unit that was responsible for the collection and analysis of enemy communication systems. I was then briefly a deputy sheriff in Ventura County. And then after that, as I joined the FBI in 2004, I began my investigative career and also began dealing and using my military training to analyze cell phone records. Analyze those records to not just understand my cases and my investigations, but to help others within the FBI. In 2007, I began the process for the certification, which for me in 2007 begins with the basic course. And the basic course helps investigators understand the types of records that we need to have from the phone company, and how do we look at those records and then interpret them or analyze them to have meaning on a map and connect them to specific events or individuals. And then as we progress into the advanced course, which for me was in 2012, the advanced course goes into not just the records and understanding them more, but it also deals with the technology that's different among each of the providers, as some of that difference in technology can affect our analysis on the end result. And then lastly, in 2013, I attended our certification program. And what's unique about this certification is that it's not just training from in-house law enforcement partners. We also, during the certification process, receive training from all the top cellular providers. So the cellular providers bring representatives from their company, not just the custodians, but also the engineers, the individuals that are maintaining and creating the network for, say, AT&T, Sprint, Verizon, and T-Mobile. So we get to learn directly from them of how their network is established, how those towers and sectors are oriented. But then we also get to teach back, is tell them how we then use those records to benefit us in the law enforcement community.
Now, with respect to the certification program, are you currently certified?
Yes.
And can you tell us how often that occurs, the certification that qualifies you to hold your position with the FBI at this point?
Okay. So every year we are required to meet at a CAS conference to maintain our certification. That CAS conference is typically a week-long course. And again, we refresh our training, not just with reviewing records and learning from our peer group about what types of activities occurring across networks across the country, but we also bring in the providers again each year from AT&T and Sprint and Verizon to refresh us of new things that are evolving in their network every year.
Now, Special Agent, you mentioned that you also, I guess, engage in instruction or training of other, I guess, law enforcement or other individuals. Could you go into that a little bit?
Absolutely. As my role in CAS, I'm considered a national asset. The unit has several assets throughout the country. I'm one of 12 national assets, which means I'm assigned to the headquarters unit, but I oversee a majority of the country, so I can work cases throughout the country. So obviously, I'm here today, but I'm not assigned to Maui specifically. I don't live here. Because I'm one of the national assets, and even other members of our team, I'm also expected to be an instructor. And so I regularly teach the methodologies that CAS uses to analyze cell site records throughout the country, and we offer that free to any law enforcement partner that would need it.
And I'm not sure if I asked you this, how long have you been a part of the CAS unit?
Well, my official training began in 2007, which made me a collateral assignment, meaning I still work regular investigations for the Bureau, but I also had cell phone cases specifically. But it wasn't until 2013 where I received the final certification and then became a national asset, where this is what I do full-time now.
And with respect to your qualifications, have you ever been declared an expert in historical cellular site analysis in a court of law before?
Yes, sir.
And can you explain that or describe it for us?
Yes, I've testified in approximately 57 trials as an expert in historical cell site analysis, and that testimony has taken place throughout the country.
Has that been in state courts?
Both state and federal court.
Have you ever testified in the state of Hawaii as such an expert?
No, sir.
You know, at this time, the state would proffer Special Agent Michael Leeser as an expert in historical cellular site analysis.
Your Honor, I don't think there's been any testimony regarding what the methodology is that they would use for making those determinations. And so I don't think there's any foundations been established to allow the showman to testify in that regard.
Do you wish to supplement the foundation?
Sure, Your Honor.
Proceed.
Special Agent Leeser, could you describe the methodology as well as the analysis you use when you do review cellular records and looking based on your expertise in historical site analysis?
Okay, absolutely. What is he doing is listening. It's surveying its environment. And what it's listening for is the best signal. And so the key to that, and the important thing for us, is that your phone's in charge of picking the cell tower that is providing it the best signal. So as you...
I'm going to object. I don't believe he's been qualified as an engineer in how cellular phones actually work. And that seems to be the province of what we're going into here.
No, this is foundational. The objection is overruled. Thank you. Proceed. You may continue.
So as you go to make an outgoing call, you would dial the digits and press send. Your phone will connect to the tower that it's already identified as the best certain tower. That call will take place and generate a record in your CDRs, your call detail records. That information that's maintained as the business records, for example, AT&T, will include who the subscriber is, who they called, the start date, and the end time based on duration, as well as the cell tower and the antenna or sectors on that tower that the phone selected to make or receive a call. And so as we get now to the records, I'm going to look at the records and identify a relevant time period that is pertinent to the investigation, and I'm going to look for the activity during that time and identify those towers. Because AT&T keeps track of where their towers are, we also know where their towers are located on the earth. And so I then take those towers, place them on a map based on latitude, longitude, and then using the subjects or the cell phone's records, I identify which of the towers the phone selected, as well as the sector or the antennas. And from that, I'm able to identify whether that tower is within proximity to the known events based on time and geography, as well as whether those sectors, the antennas that are being used, are likely to provide coverage to the area that the phone would have likely been in if it was at that event or occurrence.
May I ask some follow-up questions?
Of course.
Thank you, Honor. Now, with respect to, well, first of all, were you contacted in 2014, February, March of 2014, were you contacted by the Maui Police Department to assist them in a missing persons case involving Charlie Scott?
Yes, sir.
And what, if anything, did you do with respect to that request for assistance from the Maui Police Department?
I asked them to provide me the phone records or call detail records for the victim as well as any suspects in the investigation.
And did you actually travel here to Maui at some point to do field work with respect to that assistance?
Yes, I traveled to meet with the detectives and to, because I'm not from here, is to better understand your environment and how the terrain and topography look, and to understand the relationship of where your crime scenes or events took place in relation to cell towers that are available on the island.
And pursuant to coming to or meeting the detectives here in Maui, were you able to locate the towers that I guess are facing in the subject areas where the I guess police directed you to?
Yes, as I mentioned previously in my testimony, is AT&T does have a tower list that identifies every tower in their network based on latitude, longitude, And because of that, I'm able to plot that and determine where all of their network is, even specifically for Maui.
And you're able to do that here in Maui?
Yes, sir.
And Your Honor, with that foundation, again, to stay with Crawford, Special Agent Mike Leeser, as an expert in historical cellular site analysis.
Mr. Norton,
Thank you. Glad you.
proceed.
Morning.
Now, you say when did you travel to Maui?
I traveled first to Maui in July of 2014.
And when I say travel to Maui, I'm talking in relation to work on this case.
Yeah, I've only been here for work, so.
Okay. And was there another time other than this? When did you arrive to give your testimony today?
I arrived yesterday.
Okay. So other than July of 2014 and coming in yesterday, have you been to Maui since February of 2014?
I think I was in the Marines. I think I might have been here once in the Marine Corps, but not for anything investigative.
Okay. And what was your purpose of your visit again in July of 2014?
So in July of 2014, my goal was to meet with the investigators to better understand their investigation. So sometimes things are lost in just emails and phone calls alone. Also, having looked and done the draft analysis of the towers in this area, it was apparent to me that you have a very large mountain or volcano which has a tower on it, which creates uniqueness in the sense of its coverage area. And it's hard to look at a map on a computer and get perspective of its relationship to the key events. So my goal was to come out here and see if I could make a better conclusion or form my conclusions better by understanding your environment.
Okay. And by coming out here, and it sounds like you drove around to observe the physical landscape, is that fair to say?
Yes, sir, I did.
And did that help you to have a better understanding?
Yes, it did.
Okay. Did you inform the detectives of what about it helped you to form this better understanding?
Having looked at the way your tower is on top of that mountain up at roughly 6,600 feet, and then being able to drive the road out to Hana and seeing how the terrain features are, and using the phone that I had with me, identifying that the signal strength out in that area is either weak to non-existent, helps me understand there's not a whole lot of cell site activity once you reach out along the Hana road.
Okay. And did you do anything to document what you observed while you were here in July of 2014?
No, I did not write a report other than the updates that I made to my analysis.
Okay. And now, your analysis, is it fair to say that they don't contain any words that were placed in there by you?
That's not true.
Yeah, sure. Hold on. Your Honor, that's a very vague and ambiguous question.
The objection is sustained.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. When did you...
Yeah, excuse me, just so perhaps we can stay on course here. My understanding is that the witness has been offered to testify as an expert in the field of historical cellular site analysis. And that's the question at this moment that I'm being asked. I don't have a problem going beyond that. I don't want a forehearing, but I wanted to stay on topic. And so I have no problem with you conducting examination of the witness in the event of an objection, but I want to stay on that issue. And then we can expand beyond that if necessary. But right now, that's the question. Is this witness qualified to testify as an expert in the field of historical cellular site analysis? And so if you want to ask questions along those lines, by all means, please do so. Otherwise, let's just address that question.
Okay. Now, the historical cell site data testimony in general, that relies on the theory which you explained that the cell phone itself is always looking for what you deem the best connection, right?
Yes, simply put.
And would you, okay, and can you tell me what's the difference between a cell tower and a sector?
Yes. So when we think of a cell tower, many of us think of a pole with antennas on top of it, or we'll see, even in urban environments, a building with antennas. And whether you maybe specifically recognize it as a cell tower, those are what cell towers look like. And so a tower itself is the actual structure. The site or sector is what comprises the antennas on it. So one tower could have one individual sector, or up to, in this case, AT&T, a 3-sector, which allows one tower then to broadcast in 3 distinct directions. So a sector, if you think of a piece of pie that would be in front of you, it's like taking that pie and cutting it into 3 equal wedges so that all 3 of us could enjoy a piece.
Okay. And when you're determining when you're evaluating historical cell site data, do you make the assumption that the phone connected to the closest sector?
No. Although line of sight or proximity from a phone to a tower is a factor that affects signal strength, I don't make any assumptions as to its proximity, why I would pick one. What I'm simply looking for is that tower's coverage area consistent with the event or occurrence that took place. So I don't make any assumption about distance or proximity. I will tell you that the way the network is designed is it's designed to provide coverage to the area that's closest. It's the very nature of the cellular network. So typically, a cell phone does pick the closest, but that is not the defining factor is proximity. The defining factor is signal strength or signal quality.
Okay, so that means that sometimes a cell phone will pick a sector that is not the physically closest in proximity to that actual cell phone?
That does happen.
And that can be dependent on, like, weather?
No.
Weather does not affect that?
No.
What about cell phone traffic?
In certain technologies, cell phone or capacity or activity on a tower can create what we would refer to as noise or interference.
Okay. Well, is it true that a cell phone will jump from sector to sector, or if the towers are close enough, tower to tower, even when a cell phone stays stationary sometimes?
So I don't like to use the word jump because it just is somewhat misleading, is that your phone is constantly making a measurement. And so if I'm a phone, and I'll just use myself, if I'm here as a phone and there's a tower to my right and a tower to my left, and I'm in an area where I can survey or listen to them of almost equal strength, your phone can then select either one, but it'll always select the one that had the best signal strength at the time that you made the call. And so when I'm looking for somebody, it's actually a great tool for us is when we see a phone picking a tower to the right and to the left, because now I know that phone has to be in an area where both towers are providing coverage. So it helps me to narrow down a search area if I'm looking for somebody.
But are you aware of occasions where a cell phone, for whatever reason, picks a tower that's not the closest in proximity?
Absolutely.
And why would that occur?
So when we look at towers on a map, it's hard for us to have perspective of what is around it. And so that's why it's important to look at the environment. And so, for example, if the court reporter is a phone and there's a tower and this is a mountain, and there's a tower on the other side, that tower on a map may appear to be very close to it. But what's happening is there's an obstruction here that the phone doesn't see the tower and the tower doesn't see the phone. Now, in the back of the courtroom, in the audience, we have another tower, and yet that is further away, but there are no obstructions. So the phone sees that signal better. And so that tower, although slightly further away, is providing the best coverage because it has the best signal. So the short answer is typically we would see that where there is an obstruction between the closest tower and the phone.
What about sectors? Are there occasions where a cell phone will use a sector that isn't the sector that's closest to that cell phone?
I think we'd be talking about the same aspect of tower though.
Well, I guess my question is, if a tower has usually, at least in Maui, you said 3 sectors, is that correct?
It's not always the case. That is a more traditional layout, is 3 sectors to optimize coverage.
Okay. And each one of those sectors would be utilized by a phone if it's within... Well, how does a phone determine what sector, or how is it... How would a phone connect to a sector? What's the...
Okay. It's the same answer that I gave previously. Is your phone selecting the sector because that sector has the best signal?
Okay. Will there be occasions where, and each sector covers 120 degrees typically?
Yes, that's what we approximated to based off of, well, one, training and experience, but also when we just look at the tower, you can see how things are oriented on them to cover a circle, which is 360 degrees. 120 degrees does break it up evenly.
Okay. So if you're in if you're in one location that's covered by one of these, and so when you're drawing your maps, you do them, is it fair to say, in kind of pie shapes to represent that 120 degrees?
Yes, sir.
And so if you're in one of the pie shapes, is it possible for a cell phone to connect to a sector that's not part of that 120 degree sector that's covered where you're at? I know that's a little confusing, but I think you understand what I'm saying.
I know the question you're trying to ask, and if I'll answer the question that I know you're trying to ask. Okay. So if we look at this very simply, again, Your Honor, I'm sorry, I'm going to keep using this, is there is a tower here, and you're the phone. The judge is one sector, and I'm a sector. My sector faces like this and covers part of you. The judge's sector covers like this and covers part of you. What you are in is the overlap of the 2 sectors. And the reason that overlap exists in the network is because we don't want to have sectors that have this perfect line. Because as you traverse through the sector, you would have a drop call on the break. So the way the network is designed is even sectors that on the same tower are overlapping each other slightly, so that as you move through the network, you have uneven or uninterrupted coverage. And when you think of this just as a more logical sense, is the number one thing of commercials is drop calls. Every provider talks about drop calls. And that overlap is what's preventing those drop calls.
Okay, now there's, in that example you just gave, there's a third, if there's a third sector that the person was not in an overlap coverage, it was a third sector pointing in a different way, would it be possible for their cell phone to connect to that sector?
No.
Okay, so one cell phone, if a person's in one location and remains stationary, they would not be able to connect to all 3 sectors of a specific tower?
And I'm going to say this no in traditional sense, other than the mere fact that the phone would be at the base of the tower, or the bottom of the tower, where we would see download from the antennas. I worked at kidnapping. This is free to discuss, is where the phone was very quickly hitting all 3 sectors. And when I looked at the tower was on top of a building. When I went to that building, we pulled surveillance video, and the girl that was later taken was walking laps around the building. Well, the building's the tower. And so very quickly she was doing these laps, right? And so yes, in that instance, I would expect that to be reasonable. But if I'm here as a sector, the judge is a sector, and you're a phone in the overlap over there, it is not possible for you to hit a sector that is on the backside of us facing in the opposite direction.
Okay, now, have you conducted any actual field tests to determine whether or not that's true?
Of the theory I just...
Correct.
Yes.
You yourself?
Yes.
Okay. And do you have those results anywhere? Have they been published?
In several court proceedings, field tests that I have conducted have been published as a matter of evidence, yes.
No, I guess, have they been subject to any peer review?
Yes, all of our analysis is peer reviewed.
Okay, and again, is that documented anywhere?
When you say document, could you be more specific?
Usually when people, has anybody written an analysis of historical cell phone data that's been prepared by you, analyzed by you? Have you ever had that peer reviewed by somebody else and had seen their conclusions?
Okay, so yes, CAST, before we present our investigations for trial, they are peer reviewed by a member of CAST.
Okay, and what happens in they document their conclusions?
If there is something that they believe is inconsistent with the records, it'll be brought to my attention and an update will be created in the analysis. If there are no inaccuracies or what have you, then it'll be provided to prosecution as a final product.
Now, when cell phones are looking for this best connection, I think you use a similar phrase, that it's looking for the best connection. What if anything, well, is it fair to say that sometimes cell phones can err in which towers they then connect with?
Did you say error?
Yeah, commit an error, not connect with the best tower.
No, the phone only knows the protocol to rack the signals that it's receiving in best to worst. So it always picks the best.
So there's never an error within the phone.
No.
It has it.
I do object, because that's ambiguous. That's also confusing the way counsel stated.
The objection is succinct. You may rephrase if you wish.
So it's your opinion that a phone will never pick a cell tower with a weaker signal than a cell. If a phone has two towers to choose from, one has a stronger signal and one has a weaker signal, it's your testimony that the cell phone is always going to choose the stronger signal?
In 2G, yes, it will always pick the tower and sector with the strongest signal.
What about 3G?
And in 3G, it will pick the tower and sector with the best signal quality. Would you like me to explain the difference?
Yes, please.
So in 2G, the phone's simply measuring the RSSI, the receive signal strength indication. It's measuring true power that's coming from the tower. And it identifies the best and racks it to the top. And that's the tower it will request service from or receive service from. Now in 3G, we have a different qualifier. Is the phone is still measuring the best or the strongest signal, just like in 2G. But it's also taking a separate measurement of the noise or interference that's also occurring in that cell site sector. And so it does take into account that interference or noise, which then can slightly degrade the power that's coming from the perceived power by the phone. And thus, that's why we get to signal quality. Pure signal strength in 2G, a mixture of signal strength and signal or noise or interference in 3G. But the easiest way to really understand is the phone's picking the tower in 2G or 3G and even 4G of what is providing it the best signal.
And you just mentioned 4G. Is there a difference with that?
No, it is still best signal.
Now, are you provided any information as to if a sector goes down? You had mentioned AT&T provides you with cell tower locations and other information. Do they inform you when they have a cell sector go down?
I didn't have anything in that case. I never had AT&T notify me. I've had other investigations where Sprint has notified us that during a certain time period of the records that we requested, the following towers were being under maintenance. So not specifically in this case, no.
Now, when you're do you ever cross-reference two different phone when you're trying to do historical cell type analysis? Is it appropriate to, if somebody made a phone, if one subscriber has AT&T and made a phone call to a subscriber with Verizon, do you look at both of the Verizon AT&T records, or do you just choose one?
Well, if both records were pertinent to the investigation, I would definitely analyze both records.
Have you compared Verizon and AT&T records that were allegedly documenting the same phone call?
In this case specifically?
No, in general.
Oh, yes, I've worked cases where a victim's phone was one provider and the subject phone was another, and the victim and the suspect were in contact with each other. I've analyzed both ends to identify that the call shows up in both records, and then identify where both phones were in relation to the towers that they selected.
Did you notice any discrepancies between the AT&T versus Verizon records, such as reporting that the phone calls came in at different times?
Well, you would definitely see I wouldn't call it a discrepancy, I would call it the seizure time that's taking place. So if we have a phone, sorry, Your Honor, if we have a phone that is making an outgoing call, and that phone is here in Maui, and they're calling somebody on the mainland, and it'll be me. They press send, their timestamp for the start date could be 12:01 and 36 seconds. By the time it goes through the switch and reaches to me, and it locates me, that could be several seconds, up to 10, 15, or even longer, for that network to transport that call to me. And so my receive time could be several seconds off in my records of when the actual customer pressed send. But you would likely still see the same ending time if we both ended our call at the same time.
Okay. And what independent verification, if any, have you done or are you aware of to show that the cell company, specifically in this case AT&T, that the seizure time is in fact the time that calls were made? Have you done any independent verification in that regard?
Somebody moved and I couldn't hear a part of your question.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
It was partly worded. Have you done any independent verification to determine whether or not the records you received from AT&T in general accurately contain the times in which calls were placed?
Yes, I think I have. When you look at what we do, I'm analyzing the date and time a call took place. In many cases, for example, the case I just mentioned in the kidnapping, I knew the time that she was making those calls. And you know what I found when I went over there is the surveillance video showed the time that she's walking around is the same time that she's making those calls. I've worked numerous bank robbery cases where the suspects are seen on video surveillance and their phone is making calls at the exact same times. And I worked a homicide case where the guy was riding his bike and doing a drive-by, and he's on video surveillance talking on his phone, and I could see the call in real time on the video, and I matched that up to the time of the records as well. So I don't want to say we always get that kind of great picture of video surveillance matching up to our cell phone records, but in any of those cases I've never seen a large discrepancy unless the video surveillance timing is off. Sometimes we see that people don't maintain their clocks on video cameras.
What's the largest discrepancy you've seen?
So let me be clear, because you're now going down a road of discrepancy. I've never seen a discrepancy. The discrepancy I'm mentioning is on the other end of whoever maintains the video surveillance, not the phone.
Okay. To do your work in analyzing the phone calls in this case, did you check any of the numbers or any of the phone records? Okay, let me strike that. You analyzed certain phone calls in preparing a report for this case, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and some of those phone calls were made to individuals who were Verizon subscribers. Are you aware of that?
I don't specifically remember looking for who the subscriber was of the AT&T phones, who they were calling.
Okay.
I don't remember looking
If
for
some of those phone calls were made to Verizon, Would you also want to look at Verizon's records to be thorough and make sure that AT&T's records were in sync?
It's not necessary because we don't know what happened on the other end. Maybe that phone was not on. Maybe the phone was outside coverage area. If that person that's being called is not relevant to the investigation, there wouldn't have been records that were obtained through a search warrant for me to even analyze.
Well,
So it's not something that's always readily available.
if records had been obtained from one of the calls that were made that you analyzed and it belonged to a Verizon subscriber, and they were obtained through a warrant, and they were a witness in the case, is that something you as an FBI agent in CAST would want to review?
I would review every record that was provided to me.
My question is, though, is that something that you feel, to do your job thoroughly, you should review?
No.
So you wouldn't want to review all the records that were available via warrant?
Well, I think you misstate my testimony.
I do object because that's two different questions that counsel
The objection
asked.
is distinct.
Thank you.
Now, you had mentioned that you teach the methodology CAST uses.
I do.
And does this methodology have a name?
We call it the CAST Basic Course.
Okay. And how long is that course?
The course, depending on what aspects are added, is traditionally can be 2.5 days, depending on where we're teaching.
What's the shortest that class is?
2 days.
Okay, and is this methodology, and I'm sorry, what did you call it?
The course is called CAST Basic, C-A-S-T Basic.
And is the information taught in that class made available to the general public?
No.
So it's not subject to any type of outside peer review?
Well, you have to remember is the Bureau doesn't publish its investigative techniques to the public. We do regularly, as we talked about in my certification, is we do meet with the providers. Not only do we meet with them in the certification, but we meet with them annually. And they have gone through our course with us, as well as other engineers in the telecommunications industry. And so when you say peer-reviewed, we don't send it out to the general public. The Bureau would never do that. It never authorized that to happen. But it is reviewed by people that are very experienced in the telecommunications industry.
Is there a known error rate for this methodology?
I'm not aware of any.
Now, you use the term asset. Is that, what is the definition of an asset? With regards to how you are using it. Is
Okay.
that- I interpret it as it means once you do this full time, you become an asset.
Well, I think everybody in the Bureau is an asset. It's just a term. The reality of it is they call us a national asset in the sense that the most important part of that term is national. I work for the entire Bureau across the country. An asset is simply me, an agent within the FBI.
Okay, so is that it's not an official title?
Actually, I believe they do put that in my training, that I am considered a national asset.
Okay, and so does one have to meet certain qualifications to rise to, other than completing the same training that every FBI agent receives? Is there something, let me strike that. You just said,
Because that's miswording.
and I,
I think the question is withdrawn. You may
correct.
ask your next question.
You said that every agent you consider an asset.
Yes, I'm not going to disparage another agent just because their title doesn't say asset.
So it is a title that one achieves that some agents do not have. Is that fair to say?
The question is just so it's almost silly. I'm an asset. Yes, I'm called a national asset for the Bureau. Does that make me better than an agent that's sitting in here or somewhere else that doesn't have the asset title? No, but it does distinguish me from the years of experience that I have of finding people, finding the missing and the lost, and working cases that rose me up from being merely certified to a guy that the Bureau trusts to go around not just in the U.S., but outside the country to find people that don't want to be found.
Okay. I'm just trying to determine whether or not that's an official FBI term or if that's more of a slang term that just
I'm referred to in our documents as a national asset.
Okay, and what does one have to do to become a national asset?
I don't know how much time the court has. In addition to being certified, all of our assets have demonstrated exceptional investigative skills. All of our assets have instructed across the country. All of our assets have worked extensively for state and local agencies, finding missing people, working fugitive cases. And so we take, as members of the national team, we take bringing into our unit very seriously the individuals that we let not just complete certification, but individuals that we would later identify that we want as a national asset for the Bureau. And the key to that is, good or bad, I'm the face of the Bureau wherever I go in this country, even outside this country in places that I've been to find people. And so it's important that as that national asset, that I always reflect the Bureau correctly, and I have that type of training that's going to instill confidence in the people that I am there to help. And so we are very particular and very calculated in the individuals, not that we just allow certification, but those that we allow to be national assets.
And other than the reports you prepared with the casting map, have you provided any other documentation in this case?
I believe the ones that are provided as exhibits are the final products. I do always provide draft analysis as we lead through the investigation. Oftentimes, even after a crime's been committed, there's new evidence that does surface, and additional analysis may need to be completed to reflect different times or locations.
Okay. Does your draft differ from your final?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And this is the final that was drafted 8/25/2016?
Yes, sir.
And when did you make it aware that there is a difference between the draft and the final?
To prosecution, every time I send an update, there is an expectation of change because they're, by nature, as I've told them, there's an update to the analysis. They'll usually call if there's an issue, or they might have even requested it, updated in terms of a time range. Can you please extend the analysis to include the 11th? Can you please include the analysis of the 12th? Something like that.
And what does your final draft include that the previous versions had not?
So the final draft, going straight from memory, is I added the 12th all the way from 12:35 a.m. I believe to about 8 o'clock at night. I was asked to include that additional analysis as there was reason to believe, or not even reason to believe, the detectives advised me that the defendant was at the police station and they wanted to see that call activity, whether it was consistent with being in the area of the police station. I also noted a typo, I think, on one of the slides. I can't remember which slide it was, and I corrected the typo.
Okay. Did you also extend some of the pie-shaped lines?
I don't recall extending the lines. If I did, it's not necessarily relevant in the sense that I will always testify that the lines are not indicative of range or distance. They're not to define it. They're simply an illustration to show the direction, as we've kind of been talking about, that antenna faces in that direction. So the lines and the wedges, the pie wedge, are not indicative of an absolute range or distance. And so if something also perceives differently, it could be the difference in the zoom level. If I created a new map, if I zoomed in a little bit, it would appear little bit larger. If I zoomed out, it would appear a little bit smaller.
When you submit a new, when you submit a revision, do you also give an oral explanation?
If they feel like they need one, I usually typically type "please review" and call with questions. But oftentimes the update is at their own request of please include, and I think in this case, please include the 12th. So when they got the update, they expected to see the 12th.
Okay. Did you also do any examinations as far as breaking down a specific day you had previously looked at into smaller time frames?
I don't specifically recall doing that in this case. It is possible. I just don't recall doing that specifically. I'm sorry.
Okay. And everything that you do then, is it based on you relying that the information AT&T provides you regarding their cell tower locations is accurate?
Yes, I do rely on the business records maintained by AT&T.
Okay, well, you call them business records. How do you receive them?
I receive them via email. Typically, if it's a case of mine, I would receive them direct from AT&T. If it's a case that I'm assisting on, I would receive them from either the prosecution or a detective.
Okay, and you received some in this. Who did you receive them from in this case?
Detective Bagas.
And he provided you with the cell tower locations?
He provides me with the records that contain that information. Yes.
And would these be the cell phone records or other records?
Well, the records that are provided by AT&T include a few things. Is they include, depending on what the detective or investigator requested, they could contain subscriber information, billing and account information. They could include, obviously, the call detail records, which AT&T refers to as a SCAMP, S-C-A-M-P. And oftentimes, if you've requested, they may also include a NELOS events for an AT&T phone, N-E-L-O-S.
What is NELOS?
NELOS is AT&T's network element location. It's a system that AT&T uses to geolocate a handset through various methods within their network.
And again, going back to, how did you determine, what document did you use to determine the cell tower locations used in this case?
So AT&T is unique in their provider records in the sense that AT&T not only identifies the tower, and they do that by LAC and SID, L-A-C-C-I-D, by LAC and SID, but they also do it by identifying the latitude and longitude for that individual tower within the call detail records. And so their records are complete in the sense that I see both the calling parties, duration, time, towers by name, but also tower by location, which none of the other providers do.
And is there anything you do to determine? And so it's basically, if I hear you correctly, you're saying that the phone records contain essentially GPS coordinates for the cell towers on AT&T records?
Yes.
And do you do anything to independently verify the accuracy of those GPS coordinates?
Yes. If I'm not able to go to the environment and actually physically look and see that, yes, those are towers there, I will at least try to pull up Google Earth and look to see whether there are towers in those spots. But in this case, I was here and identified that there are towers in those physical locations where the latitude longitude depicted on the map.
Did you notice anything different when you made regarding the GPS location of those towers when you went there and physically checked them to what's on the records?
Can you define what you mean by different? What aspect would that be?
Were they located exactly where the AT&T records said they would be located?
So I didn't bring out a GPS unit and stand there and measure the GPS. Okay, so I can't say with absolute certainty that it's the same latitude longitude, but when I looked at the map and I thought, okay, that looks like it's around this corner, and then I go there and there's a tower, then just reasonableness.
Okay, and what about, how did you determine the orientation of the sectors on a specific tower?
So again, in the records, AT&T also provides the azimuth or orientation in their CDRs. Now there are instances where there is a blank, which then I have to then refer to the main tower list that's maintained by AT&T to see what that gap or that when it's blank, what it would be.
Okay. And in your experience, does the sector directions change over the course of years?
I have worked cases specifically where a crime has occurred several years back from my analysis, and when I refer to the tower list that's current, I notice that there is either new towers placed, or even that tower is now no longer there, or they've taken the antennas that are on there and tuned them to a different direction. Now, you always have to remember is that I'm relying on the information that was preserved at the time of the event. I don't use a tower list from 2016 to determine the location of a tower and its azimuth for 2014. So I always rely on the preservation of those records from that time.
When looking at AT&T records and the GPS location of the tower that is provided therein, do you know whether or not it's taking actual readings at that time, or is it just relying on what was previously input as that GPS, that tower location's GPS?
So in our conversations and training with the engineers from specifically even AT&T, some stations do have built-in GPS to identify their location. Others that are smaller sites, the company that established that would have maintained the information by, we put it, and they make a marking, take a reading, and then put that into the record once the site is established. So I don't know that I could say yes 100% of the time and no 100% of the time.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Do you have a position relative to the request to have a witness?
No, I would object. Given the methodology that's going to be testified to, I understand that the FBI uses it. However, it's never been given to the public. It's not subject to peer review. That is a factor. There's no potential error rate known. That is another factor. There's nothing regarding any control standards or how any kind of independent validation occurs. And so I think, given all of that, Your Honor, and the failure to establish the methodology with which he bases the analysis, I think there's been an insufficient foundation to allow this testimony.
All right. Before the court is a request that the witness be determined by the court to be qualified as an expert in the field of historical cellular telephone site analysis. The court, based on the evidence presented, is satisfied that by reason of skill, knowledge, education, training, and experience, that the witness has been duly qualified as an expert in the field of historical cellular telephone site analysis, and will allow the witness to testify as such an expert. There may be specific objections to methodology or the work in this case, and we'll deal with those as they arise.
Can we just break for lunch then?
No, actually, let's get the jury back in here because we've had them waiting, and we can at least start. As a reminder, the jury also has to make its own determination relative to the testimony of the witness. Therefore, you're free to present testimony in support of the witness's qualifications and testimony. You're also free, of course, to question in opposition to that.
There is one issue that did surface regarding the documentation of the 12th that we were just provided. Not only were we not provided this previously, but when we have our experts.
Well, we'll deal with that after. All right. I'm assuming we won't get there before the lunch. The record will reflect the presence of the members of the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, seated to my left is a witness who has been placed under oath already and remains under oath. Do you understand if that is the case?
Yes, Your Honor.
Very good. You may call this witness before the jury and proceed with your examination of the witness.
Okay, thank you. Special Agent Lee, sir, could you please introduce yourself for ladies and gentlemen?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Michael Easter. I'm a special agent with the FBI, and I'm currently assigned to the FBI's Cellular Analysis Survey Team, which you may hear me abbreviate as CAST or CAST.
And Special Agent, how long have you been with the FBI?
I've been with the FBI just a little over 12 years.
And as a member, and I'm going to use your abbreviation, you just use CAST. Can you just briefly explain what are the primary duties and responsibilities as a member of this CAST?
Okay. CAST has three distinct priorities, and one of those is the analysis of cell site records. And the analysis of cell site records enables us as investigators to identify when a call took place, what tower was used, and then relate that cell tower's location and coverage to a known event, such as a crime, missing persons, kidnappings. Our unit also, second priority, is teaching state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies the methodology of analyzing cell site records to further their investigations, and not just missing persons, kidnappings, and homicides, but other crimes that are of interest to those agencies. And then third is our unit responds nationally to major events. And so we will respond to significant events in different parts of the country to not just analyze historically, but analyze records in real time, so that I can better understand and help those people, those investigators, determine the importance of the phone and even help them predict where that user of that phone may be the next day, or where they may be spending the night, the people that they have as a popular calling circle, so that we can better investigate that individual of interest.
So, Special Agent Easter, as a member of that unit, have you actually gone into the field and worked cases utilizing the skills and techniques you just described?
Yes.
And approximately how many cases would this have been?
Hundreds of cases.
And then you also mentioned that you provide training and instruction to other law enforcement entities, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what type of training or instruction does this consist of?
So, as a member of the team, I provide instruction at all three levels. We have the basic course, which is a 2-day course that is an introduction for investigators on how we look at records, connect them to the tower, and then put that on a map so that we can better illustrate the relationship of cell site coverage to known events. I also teach at the advanced course, which is our course that deals with the technology and the specifics that we would see for each of the top providers and how their networks are established. And then third, I teach at our certification process, which is where we really take our new members through all aspects of cellular analysis, not just looking at records, not just understanding technology, but asking them to do field prep, field exercises that demonstrate their familiarity and really their grasp of the technique. And we also bring in engineers and representatives from the top providers like AT&T, T-Mobile, Sprint, and Verizon to help them better understand from themselves, from the companies themselves, how that network is established and maintained.
And how long have you been a member of the CAST unit?
So for me, I started in 2007 with the basic course and then became a collateral assignment, meaning I still worked my regular investigative assignments as an agent with the FBI. And then in 2013, I became a full-time member of CAST. And now I work full-time analyzing records and helping and teaching throughout the country.
And Special Agent Easter, can you just briefly, before you provide us with your educational background and training?
Sure. I have a bachelor's degree from UC Santa Barbara in Law and Society. After that, I was an officer of the United States Marine Corps. During that time, I was assigned to a signals intelligence unit that was responsible for the collection, the analysis, and the interpretation of enemy communication systems. After that, I became a deputy for approximately a year and a half, and then later joined the FBI, where I began to implement some of my training, not just as a deputy, but specifically as a captain in the Marine Corps, in using my understanding of communication systems to further my investigations in finding missing persons, connecting bank robbery suspects to banks, and things of that nature. And then through my training with the Bureau, I did attend and was certified by the FBI. As I mentioned, started for me in 2007 and progressed with training all the way through 2013, where I went through the same steps that I now teach. And so I'm certified and regularly certified each year through our CAST conference that we have with members of the team throughout the country, as well as the providers from the phone companies.
Now, when you say you are certified, who certifies you?
At the end of the course, the FBI provides us a certification that the Bureau has established as prerequisites for training for us to meet. And at the end of that, I am, by the Bureau standards, considered an expert in historical cell site analysis.
Now, with respect to the certification, you mentioned that it is a annual or yearly certification that you continue?
Yes, we require that members of the unit regularly attend the training, which is we at least do once a year, and that once a year we come together as an entire team and we learn from each other as well case studies of how records were used in investigations so that we can better understand the way that technique was or the method was used to solve that problem, that we may be also able to use that method to solve a problem in our area. But we also always bring in engineers and representatives from the cell phone companies because, as we all know, the networks tend to change over time. And so each year it's important for us to understand what's changing in the AT&T network, what's changing in Verizon, T-Mobile, and Sprint, so that as we get new records in, we're able to accurately and effectively use them to find people.
And can you describe in a little more detail when you say representatives from the major providers as well as engineers come for, I guess, to participate in the FBI certification of the people in CAS? So who are these representatives and the engineers?
So the keys that the people that we invite are people that deal with the records and deal with the towers. And so when you think of this, at AT&T, they're going to have custodians or analysts that pull the records and provide them to law enforcement or investigators through the appropriate legal process, such as a search warrant. So we want them to come because they're the hands-on of getting the records from their database. So we want to be able to interact with them of how they're pulling the records and any ways that they may change the records in terms of column headers, column identifiers, so that we know what the records are supposed to be telling us. And so if they change a column, I want to know what that column is supposed to be telling me when I get it. So we like to have them. And we also give them feedback. A lot of times the records will change and we tell them that you didn't change it for the better. Let's keep the column that you took out and that stuff. So we have a back and forth conversation on that. And then the engineers are the individuals that are maintaining the cellular network. They're the ones that are monitoring the cell towers and the cell sites so that they provide the appropriate coverage and service to the customers. And so we want them to come in and tell us anything that they're seeing in their network so that we better understand when a phone's selecting towers or using a tower in those environments, that I'm able to then use that information correctly and effectively to find somebody. Because oftentimes we're under a very tight timeline, and we don't have time to be making errors.
Now, you mentioned that you are now receive advanced certification to where you are now a trainer yourself. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
How many such certified trainers like yourself does the FBI have currently throughout the United States?
So on our the national team that we have 11 full-time. We also have several supervisors at headquarters. And so all of them are capable of teaching the entire process from basic to certification. We have another 40-plus local assets that would not be typically the certification instructors because they're just newer in the process and may not have had as much experience.
And you refer to the non-instructors or non-certified instructors as local assets?
Yes, we typically will refer to them as a field asset. And it's not the case that all of them could not be an instructor, it's less common.
And do you have a specific title of reference as a national certified trainer?
I'm referred to as a national asset by our unit.
And as well as the 11 others that you just mentioned?
Yes, I believe there's 12, and one of them I believe is a supervisor at the moment.
Deanna, before I go into methodology, do we go ahead and continue?
All right, this would be an appropriate time to take our lunch recess, ladies and gentlemen. We'll do that, and we'll be at 1:30. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Board is in recess.